Have you ever had a moment where you really needed help and you had to go to somebody to get help? Well, in today's story, in 2 Kings 4, 1 through 7, we're going to see that this is true with a widow of a prophet. Look, I have my husband with me, Greg, and of course, Miss Peach. They're joining me as I tell my story this morning. So, in the Bible, in 2 Kings 4, we are told in verses 1 through 7, this story. There was a widow who was married to a prophet. And this prophet was a man who was devoted to God. But when he died, he had a debt. And the debt collectors came to the widow and they said, "If you do not pay off your husband's debt, we will take your sons in bondage as slaves to pay the debt." Well, the widow didn't know what to do. So she went to the prophet Elisha and she said to him, "The debtors have come to take my sons as slaves. You know that my husband was a prophet of God who was devoted to him." Well, the prophet was, "What do you want me to do? What do you have?" And the widow said, "I only have a jar of oil." Well, the prophet said, "I want you to go home and I want you to go to all your neighbors. Ask your neighbors for help and ask them for a jar. Collect as many jars as you can. And when you go home, shut the door and pour until you can't pour anymore." Well, the widow went home and did exactly as the prophet said. And she shut the door and she began to pour. And her sons poured and poured and poured until she came to the last jar and she said, "I need another jar." And one of her sons said, "There are no more." So the widow got up and she went back to the prophet and she said, "I have done exactly as you have said." And he said, "Good. Now go sell your jars and pay off your debt and you'll have enough money to live your life out. So go home in peace." May God honor the telling of his word. One time when I was sharing this story with a group of women that had just been released from prison and they were re-entering into society, I was up front and a group of people, maybe 80 women sitting in the room, training them on how to tell this story. When all of a sudden one of the women stood up and she said, "I get it." And I'm like, "What?" And she said, "If I obey my authorities, it will go well with me." One of the things I love about telling Bible stories is that I don't have to point the finger to say what somebody might learn. I can tell the story and God will use it to teach. What is God teaching you from this story today? For me, he taught me once that I am like the widow. I am to pour and pour and pour all that he has given me about telling Bible stories. I once used to teach at a university about how to do Bible storytelling, but my university closed. So now my oil is teaching others how to tell stories. Shalom, y'all.